welcome back. Episode 5, can that be right?
Yes, episode 5.
Episode 5. We are talking about cancel culture today here on Critical
Yes.
Conversations. That's a lot of C's. Cancel culture, critical
Cancel
conversations.
culture's critical conversation. I know when I was typing notes, wrote CC. I was like, wait, we're going to cancel critical conversations culture.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Cancel culture has been sort of a big topic for a couple years now. I think it sort of sprung onto the scene. I don't know. Probably should have done some more like actual history onto it, but I definitely remember hearing a lot more about it in like the past 4 or 5 years with the rise of Twitter, social media, internet in general. Started to become a really big buzzword.
I would say around the Me Too movement, like this kinds of big scandals is kind of what led the current cancel culture movement. Cancel culture in itself has been around for forever, stopping leaders in power when they do crazy things. But as we know it today, in the last 4 or 5 years.
Right. The idea of canceling and absolutely. It's really sort of taken on this like broad meaning where it probably means people debate on, is cancel culture even real, or is it just people are mad about getting called out for their actions? So in their words. So I thought we would sit down today and talk a little bit about what cancel culture is, what's a good definition of it, how it's beneficial, how it's not, sort of tie it back into just, well, what is free speech, what is hate speech? All these things are really connected. So I'm excited to sit down and talk a little bit about it.
There's so much wrapped up in this idea, and I think it's just really interesting, and it's a really hot button issue. I think it's also taken on a separate movement that's not just what we think of as cancel culture, but like now the right a lot of conservative groups have co-opted this term for completely other things, and more like government imposition, and using the term cancel culture for that. So I think that's really interesting as well. I mentioned that a bit last week. We'll probably touch on that.
Yeah, there's definitely an anti-cancel culture movement, and that's definitely a growing sentiment. For sure. So we don't really have that much news for this episode. We sort of filmed this one very similar in time to the last episode, and not a whole lot has happened, but we do have one bit of news. Do you want to talk about our sort of perfectly segued news?
So as of this morning, so this is probably about a week ago since we're recording this for listeners, but so J.K. Rowling has had it's kind of been part of this cancel culture movement and has been canceled several times on Twitter for various statements. No, I feel like every few months she says something that is more not in line with current more left ideology, and it's talking about specifically the issue is she's a big feminist, but she is not a big trans feminist, or at least is trying to promote the idea that not all that like women are different from men. And so that's kind of like her whole issue. Like we have to create, if we've done so much for women in the culture, trans is a step back. Like is a step back.
She basically has the idea that like feminism but is like completely counter to being pro-trans.
Right. So that's obviously a hot button issue. So she's been called out for that many times on Twitter and through news sources and stuff. But as of this morning, she officially is coming out with a book, I think next week. And the book has a character in it, as according to early reviews are saying that the serial killer in her book that she's writing is a trans man, or is a man who dresses up as a woman to lure people in and then kill them. And so a lot of people are seeing that as a anti-trans specific, like in her books, which is before it's just been statements she said in essays and on Twitter. So that's really interesting. So like rest in peace, or RIP. J.K. Rowling was trending on Twitter this morning, so much so that Twitter had to release their own statement saying, no, J.K. Rowling did not die, but
Oh my
she is in
gosh.
fact okay. She just has this book coming out. So that was a
Yeah.
really interesting piece of news,
Wow.
which I think perfectly encapsulates what we're talking about.
Yeah, talking about today. Yeah. I mean, I feel like no matter when in time we filmed this episode, there was someone getting canceled somewhere in the world.
Yep.
Or someone trending for something like that.
Yeah. So do you
Which
kind of
is,
want to?
yeah, really. The book hasn't even come out yet, right?
No.
So like,
Which
there's probably no way to have like a fully balanced critique because.
right. And these pre-reviewers are literally spoiled the book because I mean it's a mystery story trying to figure out who the killer is, and they're telling you. Like, so I feel bad for anyone that actually reads the series that's like, oh, well,
right.
know what happens.
Oh my goodness.
So that's kind of funny.
Wild. Yeah. Yeah.
But,
yeah. So I sort of wanted to talk about a couple of the like more famous cancel culture incidents. I mean, there's definitely, like we said, a question of, is it real? What does it mean? And I think when you think back over cancel culture historically, or like in the past couple of years, which is sort of recent for how long it's been around, your sort of bigger moments are like, I don't know if you remember, he was slated to be the host of the 2019 Oscars. And then some of his old tweets came up. I think they were homophobic. They were gay jokes. You can look into this if you want to get into the weeds on that. But basically, there was a lot of outrage over that. I think he stepped down of his own volition. I don't think anyone could ever say
he was not.
Sure.
He was not asked to step down, I don't think, but he was given pressure, and so that he was like, "I think it's just better if I am not part of this. I apologize for my actions," and then
yeah, he was like, "That's an old me. I don't believe that stuff." And yeah,
which
so
I mean, that one is an aspect of cancel, like, but he is still around. Like, he's still making movies.
Right.
I think the one that put it on my forefront of my mind, which this one I think is rightfully so, was Louis C.K. was kind of, I feel like, one of the first big celebrities, and he kind of had a sexual scandal happen. But I mean, his show was canceled. His Netflix dropped his entire like comedy specials, his entire TV show, like anything that had Louis C.K. in it or on it was just gone.
Right.
You can say similar about who's the actor in, oh no, I can't even think of the show name, the political show on Netflix.
Oh, Jared.
Yeah, apologies, but Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey.
Oh, there you go.
That's who it is. So he was in a similar situation where like his show was canceled and like a lot of the movies he was in were dropped from streaming services.
Right.
So those are kind of the first two things that pop into my mind.
Right. But yeah, like you said, on the other hand, I mean, I think Louis C.K. is still doing stuff.
Right, probably.
Yeah. And I mean, Casely is, you can think back to like, we talked about a little bit ago, like PewDiePie. He's one who like was streaming, said the N-word on stream. He had a ton of sponsorships get pulled. Like he apologized, whatever. And he definitely lost a lot of like monetization potential in that, but like he's still around. He still does have sponsorships. And so, yeah, I think that's like the first sort of tension where you have like, okay, people are getting canceled in the sense of like the common sense of the word, like when we talk about it, like that's definitely
right.
a sense. But a lot of times it's not the career-ending terrible thing that you might imagine it is. Like a lot of times people are able to bounce back. J.K. Rowling, I think you told me, she's like still one of the best-selling authors.
Yeah, she's best-selling, most highest-paid author of 2019. Like, still doing just fine.
Right. I think another big one was the Papa John. How do you say his name? John. Oh man, I had it up a minute ago.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the guy who is the face of Papa John's, I'm looking up his name I really should. John Schnatter.
Schnatter.
Schnatter. So he, Papa John's had like the first controversy with him was basically the NFL was having its sort of first round of protest and people were kneeling for the anthem. And Papa John Schnatter, had said the NFL hasn't done enough to curb these protests. And because they're allowing it, the NFL's ratings are hurting and it's hurting like the pizza sales. And so I don't think this was like an official statement or anything, but he was basically like, they should do more. Like it's definitely affecting our sales. I don't agree with it. Whatever.
Right.
Papa John's got a ton of backlash for that. He was sort of like, I can't remember the whole timeline of it all. Okay, wait, I have it. Actually do have it up. So yeah, that hurt their business a lot. And he had to step down as CEO later when he used a racial slur during an internal sensitivity training conference call. And
in the sensitivity training call, that's
well, so yeah, there's more to it, and you should read up on this. But basically, he says it was a setup, and they were like trying to get him to say the word in the context of like we're not using the N-word, and he had said some comment like he wasn't saying it, but he was saying someone else said it, but he still said it.
Right.
And he claims it was just to get him out, but either way, there was a lot more backlash about that, and they made him resign as he stepped down as CEO. And yeah, he still maintains that the board conspired against him and like pushed him out, but sort of leveraging cancel culture in that way. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think we see this sort of ironic, like the right wing wants to push back against cancel culture, like claiming free speech, and just because someone doesn't believe in like pro LGBT ideology, then suddenly they can get canceled for that. And so the right wing is really stands against that, but there are also times where we see like the NFL itself, like we saw Colin Kaepernick, and there was a ton of people on the right complaining about Kaepernick, threatening to boycott the NFL. You could
say Kaepernick got canceled in some ways, like teams dropped him and he is, not in the NFL anymore. So like, that was kind of all side of that.
Right. Yeah, I think recent news, like there was a Goodyear Tires, their statement where they said, let me look up the exact wording. They said, basically, if you want to come to work wearing Black Lives Matter memorabilia, or not memorabilia, but like
like logos,
statements, pins, logos, hats, you can, but you can't wear "Make America Great Again" attire, any MAGA attire.
Interesting.
Let's see.
I feel like that's a whole other like thing unto its own. Like that's crazy.
Right. And I think that even the claims of that are dubious, like whether or not it happened, like was an official statement. But either way, Donald Trump was like, don't buy Goodyear tires. And a lot of right-wing people were like, we're not endorsing them anymore. And that's the right wing participating in the same cancel culture that it speaks out against. So I think there's some real hypocrisy.
Well,
I think
it's weird because there's this whole like weird sliding motion on what is right to be canceled, right? Like where is the line that this person deserves to be canceled, this person doesn't? Like in Louis C.K. and in Kevin Spacey, it's like, okay, they clearly did some sexually deviant things that in general populations, like that's clearly not okay. These women were harmed. Like it's totally good for Netflix to be like, yeah, we're not associated with them at all. I think it's a different thing when you have something like Papa John where he's just like saying a statement and maybe he's just saying something as a person, and then he all of a sudden gets this whole backlash on him. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. There's definitely a spectrum of things that should be canceled or not. Like, I'm probably still going to buy Goodyear tires. Like, that's like, I don't know. It's just so, I think there's
Right.
a weird spectrum there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think another kind of hypocrisy type thing is where the right will claim that like cancel culture is anti-freedom of speech, right?
right,
However,
shutting down someone from saying what they want to say.
right, but at the end of the day, it's not the government that is clamping down on speech. It's
Right.
your private entity being allowed to operate the way it wants to operate and saying, okay, this is a brand risk and it's in our best interest as a private corporation to not associate with this person or
Right.
cut ties, whatever.
If the government had stepped in to Papa John's and said, "Hey, listen, you need to fire him. Like, you have to do this." Like, that's very different, I think, than Papa John's organization being like, "Hey,
Right.
you're hurting our sales. Like, you need to get out so that we can move on." Like, those are different, definitely
Right.
different things. So.
Right. Yeah, like as a party that sort of is claiming to embrace liberty and freedom of speech and freedom of, entities, government or private businesses and people to act the way they want to act, then cancel culture is very in line with that. Like it's people speaking out against what they find repulsive and other people responding in accordance or agreement. Yeah, so I was thinking back to John Stuart Mill, who's a philosopher. He's like a really classical liberal, like more libertarian, very pro-liberty, and sort of his take on social pressures. And this has been a big sort of libertarian ideology for a long time, which is basically we never want to be in a scenario where the government is censoring free speech because
Right.
those allowing bad ideologies to still be, or harmful, whatever that should mean, to be spoken freely is a good thing because it allows for like the marketplace of ideas. It allows for discourse to come about to make sure that we do end up where the truth actually lies. It might be true that the unpopular opinion is actually correct, and we want to give it a chance to become stronger through dialogue. And when you take time to tackle something that's unpopular or potentially incorrect, that actually strengthens the truth as you learn to defend it instead of just
Right. It's this idea
shutting
of
it down.
putting something out in the open space, having people talk about it, letting it air, that makes it better,
Right.
not
Right.
worse.
On the other hand, I don't think a lot of cancel culture is focused on combating the actual idea. I think a lot of times the idea behind cancel culture is just to deplatform the person and not really separate the professional from the private and be like, okay, well, let's talk about why this is a terrible opinion. Let's talk about why. I think it's more of an attitude of we're already, it's not even worth our time to debate with a racist. Doing away with it, which I totally can empathize with. Yeah, not every opinion deserves a sit down like battle defense. However, I think it's incredibly risky to just be like lump everything into not even
Right. Once you've cut off more and more and more ideologies that you just classify as not even worth discussing, you're left with just your own. And I think that becomes a very dangerous place to be.
Yeah. Right.
So, I mean, I think it's like universally not across everyone, or even on the left, like Obama's speech, or he had an interview he did back in 2019, which he doesn't speak out a ton, but I thought it was really interesting. In December of 2019, he had an interview on stage and was talking about like, this is the quote. He says like, if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or use the wrong verb, and then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself, and I called you out, it's like that's just useless and not part of the conversation,
Right.
because it's important to have conversations and talk about different issues.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was really interesting. He said, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change. All you're doing is casting stones. You're not going to get very far.
Right. And I
So,
think yeah, it's the same sort of idea. It's like we're not really having a debate. We're just sort of
yeah,
deplatform. We're not talking about it, like shout them down kind of scenario.
right.
So yeah. And that way I feel like cancel culture, it's good that it's taking on debates in like a non-government way. Like we're not calling the police on them, but I do wish that it was a little bit more dialogue focused. I
Yeah.
definitely don't think the like Twitter mob of cancellations are focused on ideas in any way.
Well, you can't be on Twitter, right? Like the idea is that you just send out this, one thing, and it's
Right.
so easy to be like, oh yeah, this person's horrible in 5 words, where it's hard to express a
Yeah.
full opinion in 5 words. So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I do sympathize with those who are critical of cancel culture under the lens of, well, will this one day slip into the government? Will, just because it's more of a social thing to cancel someone over an old tweet, is it something that we might get prosecuted for in the future? Is it one day going to be illegal to say things that if we don't value those opinions now or justify them as even worth our time to sit down and debate with them, is it always going to remain like legal?
yeah, which I think we see that argument coming from the right a lot in the last 6 months. During COVID, I think a lot of these right-wing organizations, including my own, like we have these conversations saying the government is coming to cancel you, and specifically in a lot of religious liberty kind of clauses, with all of these churches being shut down during COVID, and
Yeah.
not being allowed to reopen or being held to different standards. And I think that is really has kind of fed into this kind of cancel culture idea that's like, okay, it's kind of slipping out of just Twitter and becoming more of like, okay, well, now you're just canceling this thing you don't want open because it's deemed as non-essential or whatever you want to deem as.
Right.
So I definitely see that argument
Right.
coming a lot more and more now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of the right wants to, like we said, rebel against cancel culture, saying, oh, it's free speech, it's free speech.
Right.
But while it doesn't seem to be the issue now, it definitely is in a lot of countries. Like if you look at hate speech laws, there's like a whole Wikipedia. I'll go ahead and share my screen really briefly, but basically, America is a little bit unique in that it's one of the fewer countries that doesn't have hate speech laws as of now. Like this is sort of a summary of hate speech laws by countries. So I would definitely recommend clicking through this if you want to learn a little bit about how each country handles hate speech, and basically sort of just through clicking through a lot of this and scrolling through it, a lot of the hate speech laws tend to be more like Canada or the UK, where there are hate speech laws. They tend to be sort of focused on anti-racist purposes. Very, very, Canada, I think in particular, has three main prongs. If I can find it.
Like provisions they have opposing certain types of speech.
Yeah, like
Okay.
looks like, okay, I think this is it. So there's basically like 3 offenses, like advocating genocide, that's illegal.
Okay, that's probably good.
And then you have publicly inciting hatred or promoting hatred, which are a lot more general.
Yeah, it's like publicly
not well
inciting.
defined.
Okay, I can see that, but promoting hatred is very nebulous. Like, what do you
Yeah,
define as promoting hatred or
right,
promoting? Like, what does that mean? Like, except like saying it or just letting someone say it, like that could be seen as
right.
interesting.
Which, yeah, it is really interesting. And there are a lot of cases where um, people have been charged. You can get jail time or
Mhm.
fines, things like that, for saying racist things or publicly condemning a race or a group. A lot of times, I think in the UK, it can be applied to like LGBT groups as well,
Mhm.
um, which is a really staunch difference from what we have here in America as of
Right.
now. Um, yeah, so it's important to realize America does, there are still limits to free speech. This is sort of tangential, but there are ways where you can say things that get you in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like hate speech is maybe like officially illegal in other countries, but there's definitely things that you can't say in America and claim them under free speech.
Right.
Um,
What was the name of that court case we were looking at?
um, Bradensburg
Bradenburg
versus something.
versus Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. Yeah, you can explain it a little bit.
Yeah. So the U.S. has sort of had these same debates that have kind of gone on in UK and Canada, and we see it being sort of punishable under criminal code in Canada and UK, like racist, hateful speech. But in the US, it is allowed as long as the phrase imminent, inciting or producing imminent lawless action, which basically means inspiring violence like in the moment.
Right.
So like a case of that, they, I think it's
Original case
very
came in the 60s, right? Late 60s, talking about the end of civil rights movement. Like, if you stand up and say, we're going to go kill these people, that's considered inciting hate, inciting lawless action, or
right,
so that can be seen as speech that is illegal. Um,
right,
but that's basically it we have for in America. Like, none of these other things we've been talking about qualify under that, right? These
right.
tweets.
Advocating for genocide, yeah,
Right.
crazy racist things on Twitter or wherever is protected. Um, but it's
Yeah.
definitely not crazy to be a little bit nervous that, oh, well, what if we do go to the route of Canada or uh, the UK, where there are some limits to what you can say? You can be canceled legally instead of just socially, right?
Right.
There's a big difference between the two. But as of now, there is a defined, like, no, you are protected legally. However, social consequences of your words are your own.
Hmm.
Yeah. But I think it's really important. I think even, as a right wing, someone who advocates for liberty, to remember that those social pressures, the social consequences of your words, are an important part of a free society. Like that, that's what
Yeah.
allows us to not have censorship laws, knowing that in a free society, often it's the place of ideas, and like having to interact with people around you will keep people in check fairly well. Like I think it's an important thing to realize, and a good thing to realize, that what I say on the internet or my beliefs, I'm going to be held accountable for them.
Right.
Maybe not,
Those things
yeah,
live
maybe
on.
not,
So,
yeah, maybe not legally right away, but for these people who say terrible things, it's going to affect their ability to get a job. Uh, I mean, just the weight of being hated or chastised by the public at large is a powerful tool.
yeah. And I think obviously the rise of social media and like these things is why we've
Right.
seen an increase in this kind of conversation in the last few years. Because it's so much
Absolutely.
easier to have that social pressure on someone. Because before it was like, what are you going to send a letter? Like, you
Yeah, you could
know,
just pack up and move to a new town.
right. And you not have those social pressures anymore. Um, so I definitely think
Right.
it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it can be it can be good and bad. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's an important part of a free society is being able to condemn ideas and have a dialogue about them. But I think, yeah, the dialogue part is definitely important.
Right. And I think that kind of leads me to another thing I want to talk about, was the Harper letter from back in July. And this is kind of coming off the J.K. Rowling stuff. But if you're not familiar with it, so back in early July, Harper's Magazine had a letter that was published with a lot of more left-wing writers and bloggers and newspaper people and a few other famous names besides J.K. Rowling. I'm not sure of a lot of the other ones, but it basically was this letter against cancel culture and these ideas, and in favor of having a public debate and in favor of having a conversation about issues that aren't settled. They were saying, like, some of these issues that now the left is saying are completely settled and over with, we shouldn't discuss. And if you disagree, you automatically mean you're wrong. Like, let's have a debate about this. So it's interesting to see that third kind of party that's not just, solidly left wing or solidly right wing having this conversation, but like these kind of other middle people that are like, well, I don't know if we should go either direction. I just thought was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's sort of tied in with fake news as well, and it's probably a larger topic, but it's such a scary thing to just censor it, remove it, take it down. I totally understand the side where it's like, well, this is harmful, these lies can result in harm down the road and just further hate and disinformation in general. But on the other hand, when you censor and shut things down, the people who believe these things, which are probably, erroneous and hateful, suddenly can't have a dialogue. You remove any sort of meaningful interaction and just cut it off at the source. And then it goes and festers in like these circles where it's just an echo chamber, and I can't publicly talk about my crazy opinions anymore. So now I just find people that agree with me. That's the only place I can talk about it. And then it just gets much, much worse.
Right. Which is why we wanted to have conversations like this. Yeah. Just
right.
To be able to talk about things.
Right. And I definitely see both sides. I see oh, it's incredibly harmful to let COVID-19 information stay online. But I feel like that says, well, now people are just going to buy conspiracy theories more because they're like, oh, I can't even talk about this. Like, that feeds into the exact same.
For sure. It feeds into that aggravation and that sense of like, well, I can't understand anything, so I might as well believe this. So
right. I just hope that there's a way to like talk about these ideas, whether it's stuff you're being canceled for or a conspiracy theory, that can sort of provide, like we said, through the marketplace of ideas, this combination of opposing ideas.
Right.
The hope is that the truth can come out stronger and we can have a dialogue that is helpful instead of hurtful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. I was talking about, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was talking about this a little bit with Catherine just a minute, and we sort of have this like optimistic view that we'll just have a dialogue and like the truth will prevail, which is definitely optimistic, and I'm not willing to say like it's going to end up being better at the end of the day, but I think that ends up resting squarely on the shoulders of the culture and the population. Like, if we have a group of people debating that genuinely desire truth and genuinely want to know what the right way is, even if it's uncomfortable, then the marketplace of ideas will probably prevail. But if we have a culture that is uncomfortable with finding truth,
other ideas,
right, they just want to roll with what sounds correct, and whatever fits my narrative, fits what makes me feel good. Then your marketplace is gonna spit out what you're asking for. So at the end of the day, I think that's part of sit down and do this is like we're going to try to actively engage in a marketplace of ideas that demands the truth, not just what sounds or feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on that note, I kind of want to talk about one more aspect of cancel culture, and something that is more like a relatable scenario for us. So I don't think we've talked about this too much personally, but John Crist is a Christian comedian who I find very, very funny. I saw him, the first time I ever saw him was live.
Oh, he's
He
on live.
was at Catalyst Conference in Atlanta, and he was one of the hosts, and he was super funny. He did some of his stand-up. He did a bunch of skits and showed his videos, whatever.
Yeah.
He became very popular on Instagram. He had a big following, specifically among like conservative Christian kind of subculture. He grew up in that and had a very part of that culture. So then it came out about 9-10 months ago that he was using his platform and specifically talking about, and specifically like while he traveled around and using them to coerce / manipulate, or I don't even know if it would go that strong of language, but like to have sex with women around the country. And he had several different relationships at the same time, and some of them whom were married women. And so like, as nothing illegal or no illegal action was taken, but very anti what he was saying he was standing for, and his principles, specifically in the Christian subculture. So he was promptly canceled, you could say. Netflix dropped his stand-up special that was coming out. He left Instagram. He kind of said an apology, but like it was basically just radio silence from him for a while.
Wow.
Which I think was fairly justified. It was pretty sad, some of the things he would get girls drunk and just like things that weren't very good. Anyway, he came back on the internet about a month ago, maybe a little over a month ago now, and started posting Instagram videos. And it left me in this weird situation where I didn't know whether I wanted to watch his videos or not. This is someone who has been mostly embraced back by his followers and like welcomed back into the community. And it's only been 8 or 9 months since these allegations came out against him, and he kind of gave an apology, but he didn't ever directly address the issue or apologize to any of the women. He mostly apologized for being a hypocrite and kind of like more general apology. And I think it's just a really interesting scenario where now, like as a person, like do I support this kind of material, or do I embrace the more like cancel, like don't give him back his power, because a lot of these things come with this power dynamic. Anyway, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I just think that's a really interesting cross section of this cancel culture that was specific to me and specific to a lot of people. So
well, I also think for a lot of people, when they're trying to make that decision on their own, like, do I want to re-listen to this person's music or watch their films, whatever. There's a big element of, well, do I believe this person has repented? Do I believe that was them in the past and they've really changed? I think at the end of the day, it has to be just like, each person has to make its own decision. Like, do I believe this person can change? A lot of people firmly believe like, oh, people don't change. It's all for show. They're just saying it to get out of the hot water. This apology seems legitimate. This one doesn't.
It's hard to know. And like in John Crist's position, it's like it hasn't been very long. It's not like it's been for years and he's gone to rehab. Like it's been a pretty quick turnaround. So
and I think there's definitely wisdom to like sit down, actually watch the person's apology video, actually learn the facts. A lot of times we just hear what other people are saying and we're like, oh, well, I guess that's all there is to it. Like he did this and then that's the end of it. But when you sit down, and there's definitely people who have been canceled that I feel like when you hear side of this, like, yeah, that definitely seems blown out of proportion. I can see where their heart was. I've watched this person for years. They're like, the people are testifying for him that know him, and it's not really like that. Like, you know,
Yeah, no, for sure.
important to like not get swept up with everyone else and actually wait till facts come out and things like that. Just keep a level head.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is a hard decision when you know they did do something wrong and then they come back not that long after.
Yeah. So that's just something that, like, you know, that's why I want to have these conversations with people and talk to other friends about it. Like, okay, what do we think about these issues, and should
Right.
we buy into this cancel culture idea for certain, you know? So I think it's good to have conversations, and that's
Right.
what free speech and free market's all about. So
Yeah, absolutely. And no one's perfect. Like
no,
everyone has
right, and that goes back to the Obama
definitely.
speech. It's like everyone makes mistakes. Everyone said something that they wish they didn't. They wish they could take back.
Right.
So we have to learn to
Yeah.
move on. We can't just cast stones at everybody who
Yeah.
says something wrong.
Right. Yeah, and that we live in this world that's very fresh, where we're like, people have had access to the internet since they were 12, and they post all of their thoughts.
Right.
Like that is such a new thing. Like I can't imagine people make wise decisions in their youth.
No, yeah, we're still figuring it all out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool, man.
Anything else?
I think that's it. I don't. There's not like I feel like a big one single takeaway or two. I mean, I feel like a lot of questions floating around the air around cancel culture are still sort of there in my mind.
Yeah, there's still, I think we have to learn to not jump on bandwagons to immediately cancel someone if they say
Right.
something that we disagree with. We should look into the
Right.
research, hear what they're saying, also listen to the people that are opposing them are saying, because that's important to listen to,
Right.
whether it's victims or whether it's,
Right.
you know, who overheard, like that's important to see as well.
Yeah.
And really try to understand the situation,
Yeah.
and then
Have a dialogue, get the
Yes.
facts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, I don't think either extreme is completely right. Like there is definitely some elements of cancel culture, but these people do bounce back and still have careers.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's quite as terrible as some people make it out to be.
Right. For sure. Okay, well, in that case, I have a recommendation. So this week I want to recommend a band called The Night Game. They are a fairly new band. It is actually the lead singer of Boys Meets Girls from back in the day. And so if you ever listen to like the Great Escape song that was popular in the early 2000s, so he left that band broke up, and then he started kind of this indie pop group called The Night Game. And they have one album, and he's releasing singles for the new album. And I just think it's really great. It's super fun and upbeat. Yeah, it's a really fun band. So
very cool. So it's called
The Night Game.
Night Game.
The Night Game.
Yeah,
his newest song, I Feel Like Dancing, is my number one most played on Spotify for the last couple months.
Nice. No, not last couple months. It only came out August 21st.
Well, then the last month. So you look on my Spotify like stats is like the last 6 months. It's like my number 3 for the whole 6 months. So listen to it a lot.
Very nice. Very nice.
That's my recommendation.
Cool. Awesome. As far as topics for next week, we are TBD right now. We're filming this pretty early, so once we know, I'm sure we'll announce it in the description what we're talking about next week. But looking forward to it for sure.
For sure. So
all right.
Be sure to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, podcasts, Anchor, wherever podcasts are found. And on YouTube, subscribe on there. We also have a Facebook page, which you can follow for updates on all the new episodes and breaks and stuff like that. So
yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Adios.